stick to it. So I like to think of this, that there are really sort of 6 stages to managing an employee. So of course we got the initial stage, we've got to hire them, we've got to train them, we've got to keep them motivated so they're doing a great job for us. We want to review their performance. And then there's all the legal ramifications of hiring people, all the contracts and all that sort of stuff. And then at some point they're terminated. They either quit, they get fired, they retire, somehow they leave the business. So in transitioning back out. For today we're going to focus on these top 4. So we're going to talk about those. In terms of legal and termination, I know of a great seminar that's going to be taking place on June 1st, if anyone wants to go and get more detail on that, where that's exactly what they're going to be talking about. It's titled Avoiding Legal Pitfalls in the Workplace, and that'll be up in Braintree on June 1st. If anybody's interested in that, let me know. I can give you the contact information, but it's done by the Schlossberg and Associates law firm up there, and it's a free seminar. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Well, we're going, like I said, we're going to cover on those. But before we can even get into that, I think it's important to start with, what's your organization about? What do you have in your organization? And whether you're a one-person company or whether you have thousands of employees, you still need to have kind of an organization chart, right? Even if you're one person, you have to then decide, when am I the marketing person? When am I doing sales? When am I doing operations? How are these jobs being handled? And you have to have sort of a flow chart, if you will, of how all these things are being done. And maybe one person is doing 3 jobs, or maybe you're doing all the jobs, but it's still good to have those kind of laid out, have an idea of what's the job description for each one of these. And as a business grows, then you can give that job description to somebody new. But if you don't have it, then it's really hard to say, well, help me out here somehow, right? It's a lot easier to say, this is the job over here that needs to get done. So with that said, what's the first step in hiring? So now we're going to get into these 4 elements. What's the first step in hiring?
Accurate description of tasks and abilities you're looking for.
Absolutely. Great point. Yes. So you got to know what you want, right? You have to know what it is you're looking for. And so you want to have those functions on the org chart sort of identified. Okay, this is the position I'm looking. So I've been doing this work myself, or somebody else has been doing it, or it's been part of somebody else's job up until now. So this is specifically what it is. And I've got a job description where I understand the duties and the responsibilities of the position. I understand who the person's going to be reporting to and who might report to them. So I understand exactly where they are in the company hierarchy. And finally, I understand the skills, the qualifications, the educational background. I've got that all listed out very clearly so that I know this is the kind of person I'm looking for. So it's a lot of times people within a company are in the wrong positions, not because they're a bad person, not because they're not smart. They're just not the type of person that's cut out for the specific duties that you're trying to make them do. And if you move them to a different function within the company, a lot of times they flourish and they're like, oh, that's great, I hate doing spreadsheets. Or somebody says, I love doing spreadsheets. And you don't want to have people doing that kind of work that they don't like doing.
So how do you, I mean, there's a big difference between giving someone a test to see what skills they have and then interviewing somebody. How do you get that balance? Because someone may present themselves in an interview totally different than what their actual skill set is on the back end.
Well, what a lot of companies do is they offer these online tests and as part of the interviewing process, so then you can see if you understand what profiles you're looking for, and then you can actually interview them and match their profiles to what a typical successful person, salesperson or operations person or accounting person, whatever, you can match up with their behavioral style with what a successful person in that role looks like, and it gives you an additional data point for hiring. I would never say it's the only criteria you would look at, but it definitely helps in hiring to have that kind of comparison. One other thing I wanted to mention with the phone interviews, and I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to get into the legal advice, but one of the things that gets trickier these days is issues around discrimination. You've picked the wrong, and how do you avoid? The phone interview is one of the perfect ways to avoid all the hassle around those issues because you haven't physically seen the person. There's a whole series of issues that are surrounding us these days about the person's physical appearance having an impact on whether or not they're getting hired. And the best way to avoid that is to not have seen them first. So it's in fact, some job coaches recommend that you don't have any pictures online. It's getting harder and harder to do these days. But don't have a picture on Facebook. Don't have a picture on LinkedIn. Just have the standard, because if a recruiter sees the picture first before they've seen the person, there's a chance that there could be a discrimination case raised that, oh, well, you didn't pick this person because he looks old, or he looks too young, or he's the wrong skin color, or there's something about that person that's being screened out. And that's why a phone interview, where you have your own records of the phone interview, and you haven't seen this person physically before, you're rating them strictly off of what you're reading off the paper, is the best way to go about that, and it keeps yourself with a very objective mind, in terms of interviewing people. So it's a thing I like. Now you say, well, I brought in these 5 candidates. I haven't seen any of them before. I don't know who these people are, and I'm bringing them in based on the merits of their character, of what I've heard about them, who they say they are. That's why I'm bringing these people in. So, one last point before I leave this slide is, during the interviews, I like to think that we're collecting debatable information and we're suspending judgment on the person. This is very hard to do. It is human nature to have love at first sight. To meet somebody and, oh, you're the greatest person, and after that, anything negative they sell, by the way, I was an axe murderer, I got fired because I was drunk on the job. You don't hear any of that because you've already fell in love with them, you just like, and the same thing, the opposite also happens. The first thing they do is they stumble, they look a little, they're nervous, and then from that point on, no matter what they say, I've solved world hunger, I've done all these, you don't hear any of those words anymore. You just think, this person's a jerk, get him out of here, next. You just want to say next. And it's human nature to prejudge people based on the first words out of their mouth. Try not to do that. We're in an interview, we've scheduled ourselves to meet for a half an hour or 45 minutes, whatever the interview time is. Use the time and think about, I'm here to collect debatable information. I'm here to collect things that when I'm down at the second round interview and I'm sitting across from my colleague and I'm going to use the facts that I've gathered from the interview, not my impressions of the facts, but the facts from the interview. I'm going to say, this person did all these great things, I liked the answer here, I didn't like this. Listen to the great things they did that support why this is a strong candidate, not, I have this feeling that this person's really better than this other person. No, you want to have the data behind it. They answered this question in this way. Not, I sort of like the way it sounded when they answered this question, but they've answered it in this particular way. So, speaking of training, that'd be the next step. Let's want to just keep moving on here a little bit. So, can you imagine the Patriots taking the field without having done any training, right? I mean, no. Everybody needs training. Every organization, people need training. We want to, when we train our people, we get better production, that people feel better, they're retained longer, knowing that we're investing in them, right? So we've got good people, but we need to constantly be working on their skills, like you coming here today, these kind of, attending seminars, doing things like that really help the overall morale in the company and make people feel better. A little bit more on training, communication is the big thing, right? Employee communication, working with people, talking to them. Are we telling them all the things that we just talked about? And one of the ways to enforce that, especially with a new person, is to assign them a mentor, right? Somebody that's been in the company a long time. It doesn't have to be a long-term relationship. They sometimes go as long as a year, sometimes they're only a few months. But assign them somebody that's their buddy, their mentor, and make sure that they have regular meetings. They go out to lunch maybe once a month, or they meet for coffee in the afternoon once every couple of weeks. Whatever it is, come up with what works best for your organization, but have them directly assigned to an employee that's been there a while, so they can ask those stupid questions that they're kind of embarrassed to ask somebody else, and they get to know this person, and then it solves a lot of issues. And the other one is regular meetings with the supervisor. And I don't know, do all of you have sort of regular sort of staff meetings with your organization where, yeah? staff meetings, kind of regular staff. It's a good process or good practice to get into. Some companies don't do that. And I think it's good to have a kind of a regular staff meeting. This is also an opportunity, first of all, in this case with the new person, meeting with their supervisor kind of on a regular basis outside of the mentor, but also overall as a team, have them at the staff meetings and have them feel like they're part of this organization. So the last thing I want to talk about today, because I know we're getting close to our time, is employee evaluation. And a lot of times people aren't really sure where they are in organizations, and it's very helpful to have a system, a process in your business where you're regularly communicating with people. So a key is it's got to be ongoing, timely, and consistent. When you're evaluating people, the big mistake is to save it all for that one meeting. So now we're talking about the stuff you did 8 months ago that I didn't like. How relevant is that? I mean, how many times does that happen to people, right? Where all of a sudden you're bombarded with all this stuff that happened. When was that? And it wasn't even your fault, and it was something different, but it's been this, lingering issue that's been, doesn't work. It's got to be timely. If something happens, catch them doing things well. That's great as a leader, to be out there finding things that people are doing well and saying, that was a great job you did today or yesterday, right? Not 6 months ago, but right now. And the same thing when things are not going well. You want to tell them about it now, not wait. So an evaluation should not be something that hits somebody by a surprise. It should be about real things that are really going on, stuff that's actually happening in their lives. Great to have measurable goals in evaluations where possible. I know some things are a little squishy, how well you talk on the phone or how nice you're dressed in front of the clients or these kinds of things, but there are a lot of, whenever we can get down to numbers, how many sales calls you're making, how many product returns have we had, how many, product successes have we had, those kinds of things. Wherever it can be brought down to numbers, you want to have numbers in there. And it's got to be a regular cycle with employee evaluation, at least on an annual basis. Some companies do it more often than that. It gets kind of cumbersome, but at least have a regular cycle of, now we're doing our annual review. But like I said before, if you're doing all this stuff, it shouldn't be a surprise at the annual review. It should be a kind of a summary of all the things we've been talking about all year. And for the annual review, I like to use a standardized process, and you want to have the job requirements, how important they are, each of those items, and then their performance on each of those items, so that they really get a feeling like, okay, I'm responsible for doing these 15 things, these 5 are the most important, and this is how I'm doing on those things. So that I have a real objective evaluation of, am I adding value to the company like I should be adding value to the business?